And I'm going to go ahead and welcome Joanna Limley up to the stage for the wetlands update. Before she comes, I'm going to say a quick warning that at some point, catering folks are going to take this wall down, and this will become 2 big rooms. So if that starts happening during our session, then just don't worry, that's supposed to happen. So lunch is going to be served over in this room, and you'll be able to eat wherever you want. So we'll be starting that up in a little while. So thank you so much, Joanna. Joanna's our wetland ecology team leader.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. I'm going to see if I can. Zoology. Did we go? Am I going back or am I going forward? I am going back. I felt like I was not in the right.
Let's get you going the other way.
We must have gone back to the beginning of zoology.
Yeah, here we are.
Okay, wetlands, here I am. Yay, the squishy stuff. Okay. All right, well, I'm going to talk for just a few minutes. I'm actually totally amazed that we're only 10 minutes behind, and so I'm going to try and keep us moving. I have just a few minutes to speak about our program, our team, and some highlights of our program, and then I'll be followed by Lindsay Reynolds from the Bureau of Land Management, Kate Dwyer from the Forest Service, and Paige Weil from Linker Technologies, who will talk with some more specifics on some of our projects. So first I wanted to introduce our team members. There are 10 people on our team, including myself. Most of us are based here along the Front Range, but we do actually have a few remote employees. So I'm going to introduce folks, people in the room. As I say your name, you guys can stand up, but a number of our team members are actually online today. So as I said, I'm Joanna, the team lead, wetland ecologist. The focus of my work is on wetland monitoring and assessment, particularly protocol development and landscape scale sampling. I'm also involved in our wetland mapping efforts and our wetland field guides and other educational resources like the Colorado Wetland Information Center website, or CWIC. And then Sarah Marshall. Sarah, can you stand up? Sarah is an eco-hydrologist, which I love that word. She focuses on wetland restoration, wetland functions and services, spatial modeling, and landscape scale analysis of watershed priorities. So we'll talk a little bit about some of her work in a minute. I also wanted to point out that she was involved in the wetland component of that Roaring Fork project that Tom Cardamon shared. So I love seeing one of her maps up there on that wonderful video. And then Lori Gilligan is joining us online today. So hello, Lori out there. She is a wetland ecologist with over 10 years of experience working with us, conducting wetland assessments for condition and function. She has a particular expertise in Front Range and plains wetlands, including groundwater dependent wetlands. She's an amazing botanist, and she has a passion for increasing diversity and equity in conservation science. Okay, Gabrielle Smith is online today. She's a GIS analyst and wetland mapping specialist. She's involved in all of our work with National Wetlands Inventory mapping and has led our projects on fen mapping, which Kate Dwyer will talk about. Louis Messner is also online. He's a newer member of our team, played a huge role in the National Wetland Condition Assessment this last summer, has experience in wetland sampling and botany. And then the other half of our team is focused on supporting our partnership with the BLM Assessment, Inventory, and Monitoring, or AIM program that Lindsay Reynolds will speak about. Tess Webb is an aquatic ecologist based in Salt Lake City. She manages our sampling through the Lodic AIM stream monitoring program. Ruth Whittington is a data analyst. Ruth is here. She does all things data for the BLM, riparian, and wetland AIM program. Katrina Castro, also based in Salt Lake City, and then Alexa Armstrong, who is here today. They both play a huge role in implementing the riparian and wetland AIM program. And then finally, Alex Binsfeld is an aquatic ecologist who's been sampling streams with us for a number of years. And I also wanted to call out Becca Hillard is a new seasonal wildlife biologist and botanist. Is joining us online today. So big team. Okay, with my remaining couple minutes, I just wanted to highlight some main areas of our work. First is wetland monitoring and assessment across the West, which we conduct through several different efforts. One is our partnership with the BLM AIM program. CNHP is the outside science partner for the BLM AIM riparian and wetland monitoring program. We've helped develop, pilot, and now fully implement the program over the past 5 years. And between 2019 and 2021, we helped or led sampling at 350 wetland and riparian areas across 7 different Western states. In 22, we will continue sampling. CNHP will continue to have the responsibility of sampling in Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, and California. And we also lead stream monitoring in Utah and Wyoming. In 2021, we participated in the National Wetland Condition Assessment, which happens every 5 years. This round, we sampled over 50 sites in Colorado and 19 in Wyoming. Our Colorado sampling will allow us to produce the first statewide estimate of wetland condition when the data have been fully processed. We also continue to use the Ecological Integrity Assessment, or EIA methods, to assess condition in wetlands across Colorado, primarily focusing recently on Front Range wetlands and Plains wetlands, where Lori Gilligan will be leading a study this summer on groundwater-dependent wetlands on the plains. And we also monitor a handful of restoration projects statewide, including a long-term multi-stakeholder project in the Gunnison Basin, which I know we have some Gunnison Basin folks here. And then the second slide I have on our tools and work is about our wetland mapping and online tools. We have a number of tools that help understand wetland resources across the state, primarily hosted on our Colorado Wetland Information Center, or CWIC website. Couple quick tools here, and I also would say this has largely been funded by EPA and Colorado Parks and Wildlife partnerships. So we have our Colorado Wetland Mapping Inventory Mapper. We have our wetland planning restoration toolbox, which combines a number of wetland data products with other ancillary data products to prioritize restoration. And then a newer mapping tool is the Beaver Restoration Assessment Tool, which I just want to say one quick thing about. So Sarah Marshall and her colleagues have been working on this. It's a tool that predicts the best places for beaver occupation. And they recently published a paper on the results of this model. And the biggest take-home message is that we have lost approximately 44% of beaver dam capacity as compared to historical potential. So this tool is really important to identify places where beavers could be reintroduced. And then lastly, the Wetland Plots Database, which is an online resource with over 3,000 wetland and riparian sites that have been sampled by CNHP over the past 30 years. This is a rich data repository. We have a couple posters in the back of the room with QR codes if you want to look at any of these resources. We also have wetland field guides in the back of the room, which is another big product that we've created over the past few years, primarily by Denise Culver, who is greatly missed in this room. And if you'd have any questions on any of this work, please let me know. And now we'll turn it over to some of our wonderful partners. Lindsay Reynolds.
I don't need to advance slides, do I? Okay, cool. I'm not going to touch that then. Hi, everyone. Really glad to see you today, and thanks for inviting me here to talk about our work with CNHP. I'm a riparian ecologist at our National Operations Center, and so working nationwide on BLM lands across our western states and Alaska for the most part. And so I was happy to hear from Carol Dotson at our state office, which is an additional partnership we have with CNHP, which is awesome. BLM manages 245 million acres, mostly in western states and Alaska, which turns out to be 1 in 10 acres of the total U.S. lands. And so we have an incredible undertaking to manage these lands for multiple uses. Colorado alone has over 8 million acres of BLM lands, and we are required by Congress to monitor and assess these lands and then report on their condition. And about 15 years ago, we were called out to to report on the condition of our lands, and that launched a national effort by BLM to undertake our national monitoring program. And it was launched initially to monitor uplands and rangelands, and so that was the first national monitoring program that we kicked off in the late 2000s. And that we call terrestrial AIM, and then a few years later followed by our river monitoring program called LODIC AIM. And quickly the agency realized that we needed to also add a third leg to our monitoring program to address riparian and wetland systems. So we manage a lot of land, but actually only about 1% to 2% of them are riparian and wetland areas, which, as you all know, are super important. And so around 2015, 2016, an effort inside BLM to, in partnership with some of our existing science partners and the Forest Service, to develop monitoring methods for riparian and wetland systems on our lands was launched. And so around 2015, 2016, that development team began to develop monitoring methods. And a few years of the team working on this effort, they realized that they needed to bring in some outside expertise on wetlands and monitoring. And so some wise folks at the National Operations Center reached out to CNHP, recognizing, as Dean Hayes mentioned earlier, their leadership and really nationwide in wetland science. And so brought them in as our science partner to help support the development of our monitoring program. So in the early years of development, Sarah Marshall and Joanna Lemley went out and helped develop some methods to monitor wetlands and riparian areas. They did a lot of testing, a lot of riding, going out and trying out these methods, bringing in methods from other agencies, looking at what other folks do. And so really pulled together this robust monitoring effort. And so in those early years, CNHP was critical in bringing in expertise and putting together that initial monitoring approach. And then over the last 3 years, as Joanna mentioned, we've taken that protocol, we've continued to revise it and to test it in the field and to start to collect pilot data. So 2019, we collected our first round of pilot data in Colorado and Utah, largely through the efforts of Joanna and CNHP Wetland Team, and then expanded in 2020. In spite of the pandemic, we managed to expand. And then in 2021, in our third year of pilot data collection, expanded to 7 Western states. And so, as Joanna mentioned, over the last 3 years, we've collected about 350 sites worth of data. And we are in transition now with the support of CNHP on moving from really our research and development phase into full implementation of this monitoring program across BLM. So that's really exciting. And I have to say, the CNHP Wetland Team has offered critical expertise and support throughout this whole development period and as we launch into this new phase. So everything from botanical expertise on our West-wide species list, wetland soils and hydrology expertise, data structure and support for building this large database to share this information, teaching and training technicians. So everybody on the wetlands team helps teach these methods and help get technicians out there on the ground to collect the data in a repeatable way. And then in addition, providing guidance and numerous supporting documents. So it's really been an amazing partnership to build this program and as we kind of launch into this new phase. And so as we launch into this new phase, one thing I wanted to talk a little bit about is what we're looking forward to and looking towards in our continued partnership is to continue full implementation across BLM, but in addition, keeping that information sharing and building bridges with our partners outside the BLM, our sister agencies, Forest Service, Park Service, EPA, NRCS, and CNHP really plays a critical resource a critical role in helping us build those bridges and keeping us up to date on the latest wetland science and monitoring techniques. So we're really excited about the future, what the work we've done so far, and continuing this awesome partnership. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. And then our next speaker is going to be Kate Dwyer, talking about another really important partnership we have on fen wetlands.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kate Dwyer. I'm a research ecologist with the Forest Service, so I'm with that very small research branch of the Forest Service, but I do speak for all of my colleagues who are practitioners on our national forests. I'm going to be talking about 3 projects that are actually related that CNHP is helping us with. The first one is wetland mapping that Joanna mentioned, and I'll just start by saying that prior to working with CNHP, who helped us really improve wetland mapping for many of our national forests, the baseline information that most forests had for their wetland resources was National Wetland Inventory, or NWI, which wetland ecologists all know is usually severely inadequate. It ranges in quality and completeness, but it really is a poor reflection of what, in many places, of what the wetland resources are. So the wetland mapping project that CNHP is helping us with is focused on fens, which are groundwater dependent, peat accumulating wetlands. It started by mapping here in Colorado on the White River National Forest and the Rio Grande National Forest, but it's expanded to the U.S. Forest Service Region 4, which is the Intermountain region, includes Utah, Nevada, southern Idaho. And with the intent there, we kind of convinced the leadership in Region 4 to get their wetlands mapped in support of forest plan revision and forest planning. But I will mention it's had multiple benefits for the forests who have their wetlands mapped. To date, we've completed, or CNHP has completed, mapping 10 national forests in the Intermountain region, and this includes mapping tens of thousands of wetlands, millions of acres, and adding really thousands of previously unknown wetland locations. So it's really augmented our baseline in terms of our knowledge of what our wetland resources are in national forests. So like I mentioned initially, the mapping effort was to support forest planning, but the forests that do have their wetlands mapped have been using these baselines for multiple other purposes. On the Payette National Forest in Idaho, the fen mapping was used to inform NEPA and project planning on a very large mining project. And then on at least 5 forests that I'm aware of in the Intermountain region, the wetland mapping has also really contributed to laying out large fuel reduction efforts. The Forest Service is currently engaged in really large-scale, landscape-level fuel reduction treatments, which include a wide range of forest prescriptions. And this includes a lot of collaboration with all resource disciplines. It includes timber, hydrologists, soil scientists, and botanists range. In the past, the interest in wetlands, particularly fens, has largely been driven by botanists. But with the knowledge of where wetlands are, now it's really possible for multiple disciplines to be using these wetlands maps in their work. So a related project that in regards to the fen mapping is that the products that CNHP does for us maps all the wetland polygons, and then each one of those polygons is assigned a probability as to whether or not it's a fen. In 3 categories, whether it's high probability, medium, or low probability of actually being a fen. And a field test that we did, that we've conducted, showed us that Approximately for the categorization that CNHP has done for us, about 75 to 80% of the wetlands that were mapped as either medium or high probability were in fact peatlands, and about 60 to 70% of the fens or wetlands that were mapped as high probability fens were indeed fens. So this validation of the fen mapping categories is also really beneficial for us as we move into assessment of climate change in terms of both carbon and water storage. Knowing whether or not a wetland is a peatland or a fen can help move us towards assessment of stored carbon stocks on national forest lands. And also, I want to mention that, or bring up what Tom had said, calling wetlands second snowmelt. It also really helps us evaluate the water storage capability of watersheds. The last project that I want to mention is the impact of wildfire on riparian areas and wetlands. And we had opportunity to do this by partnering with CNHP, who's helping us map by integrating fire severity maps and fen mapping and riparian mapping for the Mullen Fire on the Medicine Bow National Forest in southeast Wyoming. So we really could not do our work. I want to reiterate what I think Carol Dawson said. We really can't manage our wetland resources without knowing where they are. And CNHP has allowed us, has provided us with the ability to use these baseline wetland maps in really all of our project planning. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much, Kate. And our third guest speaker talking about wetland projects is Paige Weil from Linker Technologies, who's going to be talking about modeling and mapping, particularly beaver pond wetlands in the Colorado River Basin. So thank you, Paige.
All right, I do actually have to figure out how to use this thing. All right, there we go. Also, tough spot being the last speaker before lunch, so bear with me, I'll keep it brief. Oh, I'm not? Oh, nice. Only 5 minutes. So my name is Paige Weil. I'm a water resources engineer and remote sensing and climate specialist with Linker Technologies. We're sort of a company that bridges the gap between consulting and sort of research, which is a really interesting spot we get to work in. And we recently partnered with a company called Linker Analytics. We purchased a remote sensing and AI shop in New Zealand who have done similar work to map wetlands broadly and map subclasses of wetlands using AI and imagery-based techniques to really cover a wide swath. So the overall objective of our project was to track the aerial extent of wetlands and presence of beaver dams, both real and analogs, over time throughout the entire Colorado River Basin, specifically in a repeatable and low-cost way. So I understand that manually going through and updating these things and getting field crews out there to validate them is just a massive effort. And so while our effort is more focused on model-based results, we can cover a much larger swath and we can repeat it every time there's an imagery refresh. So specific metrics we're tracking, because this is such a broad scale, we had to limit the scope of the actual classes we're trying to map to sort of vegetated valley bottom wetlands. So there's quite a few areas that get left out of that, but tracking those in space and over time was a primary goal, as well as beaver ponds and beaver dam influenced vegetated wetlands in those areas. So this initial pilot project for the Walton Family Foundation includes 3 time periods where NAPE imagery was available. So that's the other aspect of this. Imagery can be, triple your project budget depending on the quality of imagery you want to use. So we use NAPE imagery because it's free and 1 meter or better resolution, and developed training polygons throughout the entire Colorado River Basin to then develop our model on. So on the right, just to point out, the black areas are all the NWI polygons in the current published NWI that have been done since 2017. So it's not very many, and that's a really big area. So we're hoping that our effort can help update these, or at least provide another set of results for context that can be compared against all of the great efforts that have been presented here today. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. So one of the other unique aspects of the work we're doing is we engage with CNHP, specifically Sarah Marshall has been helping us really, in really close partnership to develop these training data sets where a wetland mapper will actually go through and manually delineate thousands of acres. I can't tell you how many polygons Sarah has had to click through herself to identify both beaver pond locations as well as sort of wetted valley bottom wetland area, which then feeds into the model. So we really have a direct sort of machine-human interface in developing our work here. So these are some examples of some training areas where we identified kind of object detection boxes that fit around known beaver ponds. And then just some example results that were sort of preliminary, and the model has continuously improved over time, but we assign a particular confidence to a box that then identifies a beaver pond wetland. On the top is a comparison of the training data that's developed to inform this model compared to NWI. So you can see that, as many others have pointed out, NWI is not a perfect product, but it's a good starting point. And we need to develop from expert input these wetland coverages that can then feed into the model. And then we continuously feedback and train the model further. So the bottom is sort of a comparison of that training data versus an initial model run. So we feed this back over and over again to improve our model, develop new training data, and isolate areas where these models need improvement. But this is all sort of a work in progress. We don't have real results to share yet, just to say we're doing this cool thing in space and time. And some of the initial end products, you can see here, the colors are a little hard to pick out, but you can see the NWI lists a few beaver ponds in this particular reach, but our object detection model is actually found quite a few more. And that's part of the point, is we're trying to track beaver pond locations and wetlands generally throughout the Colorado River Basin on these 3 time periods. And sort of the follow-on to this effort will be a widespread comparison of these results against both the BRAP model as well as a number of characteristics of climatology and just general watershed condition. So yeah, that's the work we're doing. It's midway through a pilot project. I know I'm out of time, but I will make one more plug. We got funding to extend this work outside of the Colorado River Basin to all of Colorado. The CWCB has funded us to continue this effort. Part of that will include sort of a focused stakeholder engagement effort. I know the Upper Gunnison Water Conservancy District is very interested. They provided us a letter of support. And so anybody who's interested in seeing what these wetland changes and these high resolution maps can do for you and would like to, raise your hand and say, I want to, know more about these and see what they look like in my area, we'd love to engage with you and help develop sort of secondary products that can inform your planning efforts. So again, my name is Paige, and I'm out of time.
Thank you, Wetlands team. What an amazing bunch of work happening. Thank you so much. How exciting. And to everyone participating here, whether in the room or online, if you're online, please reach out to Paige or any of our other speakers if you want to talk about their work and their collaborations. So.